Story time. Once upon a time, I was meant to prepare a session for a team. I was probably about 18, 19 years old. I was still relatively new to coaching. I still had absolutely no clue what I was doing. Sometimes today I still feel the same, but anyway, then I was sitting there, drove to the session, and just had absolutely no clue what to do. And the whole time I just ended up playing games and just kind of doing whatever. Luckily, it was a under 10 girls team. They were super recreational. They just wanted to play games anyway, so it kind of worked out. But it kind of got me thinking then, I don't like that feeling of feeling unprepared and not knowing what to do. And, I'm mostly clock watching and making sure that everyone's just safe and having a good time. But I never really got anything out of that session. The players never really learned anything other than, just having fun and whatever they would have learned during that time. So, and I know some of you probably are in the same boat. You rock up to a session and you have absolutely no clue what to do, or you think you might know what to do, but you don't actually know how to go about and do it. And that's the purpose of today's video. In this video, I'm going to give you 3 purpose-driven steps in how to create your own team session so you never have to end up like 18-year-old me. But before we get started, make sure you hit like and subscribe, as it really helps the algorithm just push the video. As I'm trying to grow this channel, it'll do me a world of favors and I'll love you forever. So hit like and subscribe. But anyway, let's get right into the video. So at the very beginning of your session, you need to have a pre-brief. And what basically I mean by this is you need to bring the players in and have a chat with them. And this could range so much. If you're close to the players, you ask them how the weekend went. Maybe you know a couple of their siblings. Maybe you can banter with them a little bit. This is just to get the players in and comfortable being in this environment. You could even, if you want to go a step further before this, have activities set up before they arrive. And then once you're completely set up, then you bring them in for the pre-brief. This is to be able to get, if they're youth players, this is just to get all their unfocus out of them, so to speak. You get them in, you talk to them about their weekend or what they did at school that day, basically just to get them all together, focused on everything else. Ignore the outside everything and then just focus on the practice itself. Now, in this pre-brief, you want to get them focused, you want to set the tone for them, and you do this by layer their learning. Now, what I mean by this is whatever you have planned for the session, whatever your purpose and intention is. Let's say, for example, it's passing and receiving, just for today. Let's say it's passing and receiving. To do this, you want to ask them questions. You want to poke their knowledge, try and see what they already understand. Maybe they really know how to pass, and so you bring that out of them. You ask questions, okay, what technique do we use? How do we pass a ball? You hear from them and see where they're misunderstanding or where there's gaps in their knowledge. Then you want to keep asking them questions, poke and prod, and then you want to give them a couple tools. You want to try and slightly guide them towards where you want them to end up. So let's say your practice keys, or what you want, your objectives ideally, is how to pass a ball and how to receive a ball. So maybe you give them a couple hints and tools on what you'll talk about later. This is just to familiarize your players with the concepts that you're going to go into depth later. You want to get them focused and thinking about what you're actually going to be coaching, so then when you are coaching, they can remember, oh right, we talked about this at the beginning of the session, so now I can understand this just a little bit better. You just want to sort of give them a taste at the beginning of the session of what you're going to do, and then layer that learning and keep going as you go on. Now, kind of almost jumping ahead a little bit, or jumping behind, is you need to have an outcome for the session. So this comes before you layer learning. You need to have an outcome or something that you're trying to achieve. This could be as simply as basic as passing and receiving. Maybe you just want to teach them techniques. That's great. Or it's something a bit deeper. And so you really need to just be very specific and intentional with what you want the players to learn. You don't want to just rock up and try and teach them 20 different things. You want to have maybe 1 to 3 key things that you want to teach them and ingrain in them throughout the entire session. And then once you have that purpose, then you can tailor your session and create specific drills or activities that you're going to do for that session. Now, the next part that's sort of tricky and what a lot of coaches struggle with is what format to use. Now, here in Canada Soccer, they came out a couple years ago and said you should start with a game, move into an activity, and end with a game, called the GAG method. And what this would do is get players, especially young players, into a game as soon as they come to practice, so they would enjoy coming to the session, then you get an activity, and then you just end with a game. So this way, players are playing all the time, there's not really any standing in lines and whatnot, and that's great. So that's one method you could use. Start with a game, do an activity or a drill or something along the same lines, and then you end with a game as well. The format that I've fallen in love with in the last year is your unopposed, opposed, small-sided game method. Now, what you do is you pick a specific intention for. So let's say it's shooting or let's go a bit more specific. Let's say volleys. So to start with, you're going to have something unopposed. So they're going to do the skill, do the volleys with 0 defenders. Maybe you can add a goalkeeper, but probably 0 any sort of defenders. That way, this is just focused on getting the repetitions in, just doing as much as possible, and you're just coaching techniques. So now that you have an unopposed structure, you can then just focus on how they actually do the skill in general, and then that aligns with the outcomes. The second part of this is opposed. So once they understand the technique and what they're supposed to use, they're going to move into an opposed session. So now you add that goalkeeper, you add that defender, you make the skill a little bit more game realistic. In a game, it's very rare that they're going to be able to shoot or take a volley if there's absolutely 0 defenders around them. So now you introduce a defender. And based on the skill level of the players, you can either say the defender is lightly defending them or it's full game speed, you want them to defend them. So that would be the second part. And the last part is you create a small-sided game, you know I'm in love with those, a small-sided game to be able to bring that out. So in academies that I worked for before, we do an unopposed session or unopposed practice where all they would do is get a ball thrown up and bounce and then volley into the net. That was the unopposed. The opposed was then you add a defender to their back, so now they have to spin around the defender and shoot. And for more advanced players, that defender could actually win the ball back. But for most of them, it was just a little bit of pressure to make it a bit more game realistic. Then, for the small-sided game, we played handball. So basically, you get a player to throw it up and volley it to another teammate, they'd catch it, and then volley it to another teammate. So that way they're getting the techniques. And then you play a game. So one team's trying to score in one net through a volley, one team's trying to score through another net with a volley. That way, all 3 of your sessions have volleys involved in them. So for that hour and 15 minutes, you've only worked on one specific thing. And that outcome that you had at the beginning of the game, that layer of learning that you've started with, is throughout the entire session. And since in the pre-brief, you've talked about volleys or passing, receiving, whatever your topic is, that whole session was just on that topic. So what do you think the last thing we're going to do is? Well, the last thing we're going to do now is have a debrief. So now we're going to bring the players in, and this is where you really make your money. Then you ask players what they've learned about the session today. And fingers crossed, you've done enough where they're going to come back to you and tell you exactly how to perform a volley or passing, receiving, whatever the topic is. Whatever the outcome is, they're going to tell you exactly how to do that and what they've remembered because you've layered that learning. So with the unopposed, and then the small-sided game, all in all, you want to know, what does this session accomplish? What am I trying to get out of the session? What sorts of conditions do I need to create for my players? How can I make my drills and activities very purposeful and so that it's very much working the topic that I want to work on? And lastly, and arguably most important, is it fun enough for the players involved? Are they actually going to enjoy the session? Because any one of us can just set up a line of players and have them shoot over and over and over again for an hour or play a random game. But if we're not intentional enough and we're not creating things that maybe we would enjoy or the players would enjoy, that's the difference. I'm not going to create a session that I'm going to enjoy because little Johnny might hate what I really like. So you really have to tailor everything to your players. So just to recap, make sure you bring the players in for a pre-brief. Banter, get to know them. This is your chance to really connect with the players and create a team culture. Then you layer the learning. You tell them what we're working on. Maybe not exactly how, but tease them. Give them a little taste of what you're going to do during the session. Question them, get them, ask for their understanding, and check for their understanding. Then you're going to move into a format of your choice, whether you have a game, activity game, an unopposed, opposed, small-sided game, or something else that you found. You need to have a format that fills the outcomes and the purposes that you actually need. Then, once you've done all that, you're going to check, what does it accomplish? Does it accomplish the outcomes and goals that I have? What sorts of conditions do I need to make in order to allow my players to get the most out of this? And lastly, is it fun? And once you bring them all in for the debrief, hopefully you've done your job and they understand the session or the coaching points to a T. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or find me on Instagram at YourCoachJordy. DM me for anything. I'd love to help. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.